Hi, this is Siofra Brad again, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So we started our Facebook group, like everybody asked, during our last live show, and I requested questions so that I could get ideas for videos to do. And so one of the questions that came across, I thought we'd see if we could explore today. So here's the question. What would you suggest we can do to better attune ourselves with higher beings or energies, also known as spirit guides, deities, or such, in order for us to find, using this term loosely, our ideal path in the practice of magic? I realize, of course, that even if we find our ideal path at some point, things will undoubtedly change as we evolve and progress into the future. And I thought this was a good question because there's a lot of potential room for discussion and discovery and all kinds of things implicit in the question. Because the first thing is, how do you define your path? Obviously, individually, every person's path is unique to themselves, this we know. And is a path something that's defined as bettering yourself, trying to reach towards a goal of some kind, to achieve a specific kind of end? Or is a path just the journey that you happen to be on that becomes your path? Both of these things can be true. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. But it's always good to think about the language that we use when we're trying to understand these things, because I was having a discussion last night with my granddaughter about the concepts of success and failure, which I think is applicable to this discussion. And the idea of success and failure is a externally imposed definition of what makes our life worthwhile and what makes what we're doing good, bad, indifferent, useful, not useful, and accomplished. And I was thinking about the fact that we have a lot of self-imposed standards. We absorb them from our environment, from society, from people, from books that we read, and everything else that's around us. And we create these definitions inside of ourselves and then have this standard that we have. So like, here's the benchmark of what it means to be successful, and anything below that is by definition a failure. And the obvious ones, of course, that we can see are like job, monetary worth, power, the ability to influence others, that kind of thing. Seems to be a more common criteria that we use as people to determine whether or not we're doing a good enough job in whatever we're in. And since most of us who are watching this channel and are, absorbed in the topic of discussion and so forth, are looking for a spiritual path, awakening, meaning for, the greater part of life and the meaning of it all and so forth, we can assume that most of us aren't using that particular set of criteria. But we can see how readily that fits, as far as like, if you have an externalized criteria of, say, you need to get a good paying job and things are not working out the way you think they should, and you can't get the job you think you deserve or the one that you want, then you determine that you have failed in this endeavor. And, and that's true of spiritual quests as well. If we predefine what it is that we're trying to achieve and have given ourselves a benchmark, so whether the benchmark is being able to astral project, doing spell work, communing with the deity, talking to our higher self, remembering our past lives, learning how to do the tarot, being able to work with crystals, whatever the subject in the field might be, and we've determined that this is something we want to succeed at. If we think we fall short of that, then we're frustrated. We think that it's not working. We reevaluate our life and everything that we're doing in it. Sometimes leave this particular kind of path because we're not getting what we thought we were going to get, not understanding what it is that is actually of value necessarily. And so it's a big, huge trap that we have created for ourselves, that success in a spiritual sense has to meet certain criteria in order for it to be valued. I think that success and failure are the same thing in a sense. If you can't succeed at doing something, like you've set yourself a goal and it doesn't work, if you learn from not being able to succeed in that sense to that goal, then your learning has been a success, because then you won't spend an inordinate amount of time trying to accomplish something you're not suited for. Like when Ian was going to college, he was under the impression that he was good at math. He used a lot of math in designing speakers and building amplifiers and audio equipment and that kind of stuff, but it's a specific type of math. He was a good technician. He understood how things worked and so forth. And then in school discovered that math was incredibly difficult, and being the stubborn person that he is and not wanting to fail, he would spend 8 hours trying to do his math homework. And art and English were easy for him to do, so he could get that homework done relatively quickly, and then spend all of his energy trying to crack this math thing, to the point where he was asking me how to solve certain math equations, and I'm like, I'm not a mathematician, I have no clue. But we would talk through it, and sometimes it would help for some unknown reason. But it was very difficult for him to acknowledge that he was not good at math, that was not his forte, because society says men are good at math. Experience said that he uses it as a skill. His expectation is that he should be able to do this if he just applies himself more completely and just beat his head into a wall until it's a bloody stump, and trying to make his brain work in a way it's not designed to work. So it's a good example of this whole idea of finding a path and thinking that you know what it is and what it's going to look like. He finally did come around to realize that he has a creative intelligence, a creative mind. He's an incredible artist. He found his art. I knew from the beginning that he was an artist, because the first time he started taking photographs, his natural instinct for framing things and the way he would take pictures and so forth, the composition of it, was always just spot on. And as a creative person myself, I recognized this in him. And of course he was filled with anxiety and lack of confidence, and not really believing that this was something he was good at, because men aren't good at that. I don't know where that came from. But considering the fact that a lot of great artists in history were men, but it was sort of something that was stuck in his head. So he thought he was on one path, and he was on the wrong path. He was on a path that wasn't suited to his gifts and his strengths. And I think there's this idea of overcoming obstacles as being a part of this process, that you need to prove yourself, you need to overcome some kind of thing, break through a block and come out the other side. And while in some cases that's true, there are certain things where we're holding ourselves back, and the block we need to break is the idea that this is something we have to do, or this is the way we have to do it, and not letting ourselves have the freedom to explore other options. So it's all connected to everything that happens to us. I'm going to look at this again so I don't get myself too completely off track. If you're trying to attune yourself to a specific kind of energy, like getting in touch with your spirit guides and deities and so forth, the environment that you surround yourself with and the activities that you do are going to impact those channels, those openings, those vibrations. It's kind of like everything that exists, everything has its own vibrational frequency. Whether it's a stone, or a living being, or a person, or a celestial object, everything has a range of vibration and energy. And the more attuned you are to that specific kind of energy, the more likely you are to tap into that particular field of whatever it happens to be. And it doesn't mean that one is more correct or more right than the other. It just means that in the universe of dimensions beyond physicality, anything can exist in a non-corporeal form. And when we're looking to deal with spirit guides, ancestors, gods, goddesses, celestial beings, whatever they happen to be, we are dealing with the realm of the incorporeal. Therefore, it can come in any shape and any color, size, vibration. And what our job is, as to attune ourselves to that frequency, is to work on our own vibration, if you will, by delving into that reality. It can be hazardous to our mental health if we're not careful, because the fantastical worlds that can exist beyond the physical can draw us in and completely disconnect us from physical reality, which is why we talk so much about grounding and boundaries and balance and that kind of thing, because you are in a physical form, and this is part of what it is we're learning how to be, and how to exist within and become a part of this physical realm, my opinion. So, like, if you want to dream about a certain subject, you watch shows about that subject, you read books about that subject, you look at pictures about that subject, you immerse yourself in that subject, you sense or choose the colors that you associate with that subject. You put those things up on the walls of your bedroom. You meditate on it, you think about it, you tune yourself into that vibration. And then in order to know that you've made the connection, you have to be still enough inside of yourself, again, know who you are, to be able to tell when something other than you approaches. You can't tell the difference between your voice and spirit guide voice or deity, God, goddess, other voice if you're still so involved in your own head that everything is you. You can't tell the difference, which can lead to some forms of apparent insanity, I think. So yeah, that's why boundaries and control are so important. And the path itself that you take, there's obviously no single path. And yes, your path changes as you evolve. I mean, I started off as a wild, magic, undisciplined, and ungrounded, insane person, I'd say, being battered around by my life and my experiences and so forth, and spirit was the one thing that helped to keep me from losing hope while I was going through all that. I mean, I had my guardian angels that were there every night when I went to bed, and I had Moira who showed up, and I had visitations from other beings that I could sense that got me out of my life and out of my body and out of my reality and so forth, and had memories of past lives and things that gave me perspective that things were once different, therefore things could be different again. It seemed clear if they were once some other way. It also helped me to understand what wasn't right, when things were wrong, that this isn't the way people should be, this isn't how they're supposed to act, this isn't good, this is bad, and all that. And as I have evolved as an individual and started to get better boundaries and so forth, my constant inundation by information outside of myself is less, but I'm open to receiving it when I need it. And so I become aware of things that may be coming along on the horizon, ready to, not catch me unawares, hopefully. But a lot of this has to do with being in your life and paying attention to what's around you, because like when we were talking about Beltane on one of our live shows recently at the beginning of May, and I was remembering the magical Beltane I had when I was just, sitting all by myself at an abandoned house, finding flowers from this wonderful garden that these people had had before they no longer were there, and weaving grass and making a flower ornament, hair wreath or whatever for my head, and the birds that came by and sang to me, and the wind that went through the grass and moved it along and touched me, and everything else. It was an incredibly magical experience. That's the personal experience that's so important. And that is what really moves you along and becomes a part of what you're doing, becomes a part of that path. And it definitely changes. So I'm going to pause this for a second so I can blow my nose and not annoy people. So there's no doubt that the personal experiences are probably about the most important thing that you can have that lead you along. And it's paying attention to the quality of what's happening around you. Like when I suddenly realized, like, someone hit me in the head with a brick, that I obviously should be a massage therapist, since I'd been a psychic healer for 16 years, and I discovered I could do it full time and not have to work for someone else and have someone else's thoughts running through my brain, because I was a typist, and the dictaphone kind of typist where I was constantly transcribing other people's thoughts, and it was getting quite annoying. And it just like, well, obviously it's so obvious. Why didn't I see it sooner? But I wasn't ready to see it sooner. So it's not like it was a bad thing that I waited that long. It was just, but when it became clear, I was ready to hear the message. And I'm getting better at listening to myself. I mean, for example, I recently closed my physical office last October. And during the summer, I started having this thing on my foot that was becoming a problem. It was like a fatty tumor kind of thing, was right in front of my ankle, and swelling and getting to be irritating, and was causing some issues with walking and so forth. And went to the doctor, and they said that they could take it out. And I decided that would be a good thing, because it's not going to go away by itself. And then was going to be off work for a period of time. And COVID definitely impacted the number of clients I was seeing significantly, and had been for quite some time by then. And I was telling my granddaughter out loud about what was going on in my life, and that I was going to be off work for maybe a month, and how many clients did I have still, and how much my rent was in my office. And as I was saying it out loud, I was hearing what I was saying and looking at it, and I went like, I need to close my office. It's time for me to leave. And then I did. I was quite pleased with myself that I heard what I was saying. And I think that's part of it, is like a lot of times we know on some level what it is that we should be doing, or what it is that we want to do, or what we're ready to do, but we don't always listen to ourselves. We try to override our instincts with logic, other people's opinions about what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing, and so forth, and not following our own. And when it comes to a magical path, there's so many possibilities. It's like, of course, life in itself has got so many possibilities. You never, when you're born, are you going to be an artist? Are you going to be a scientist? Are you going to be a healer? Are you going to be, there's like any possibility open when you first arrive. And then those possibilities begin to narrow as your personality evolves and your interests evolve, and what you're here to learn starts to happen, and what you refuse to learn happens, and you end up on a side note somewhere for 15 years and don't realize it until one day you look up and go like, oh, yeah. And I was really grateful to the universe when I realized that I was to become a massage therapist, that the universe was very overt in the signs by giving me all those roses from strangers on my way to, take the test to get this job, so that I could have a job and support my children and take care of them and go to school at the same time. And that's the thing, is like, being able to tell the difference between a roadblock that you're supposed to overcome and a roadblock that's trying to divert you into a different direction isn't easy. You can make mistakes and fail to see the writing on the wall. But when you look back and you see it for what it was, then that pushes you forward in the right direction. And blaming yourself for not being as aware or alert or evolved or whatever isn't helpful. And the thing is that what is the point of being here to start with? And that's probably, the idea of that is going to vary depending on the individual. To me, how you can tell that you're living a good life or getting it right, or I don't know what the right phrasing is of that, is in the little things. It's not in the big things. It's not whether you've managed to become a powerhouse and can influence other people necessarily. Some people, maybe that's why they're here, and that's what they do, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean that the person who is just going about doing their business day to day, taking care of their family, isn't also on their right path and succeeding at what they're here for. And for me, what I've decided is how I act towards others is the most important thing, not what I do in or achieve. What I do matters, but not what I do for a living or what have you, but being able to be who I am, being myself, and helping people where I can, and beginning to understand that there's a lot of people I can't help. And it's like, because not everyone is ready, willing, or able to accept help, or it's just not the right time for the kind of help you have, or you don't understand what's really going on and what you're offering is the wrong thing. And it's not personal. So I've decided that if I impact a single person in my life in a positive way and somehow improve what they're going through and able to truly help them, then my life has been a success. It doesn't have to have it. I don't have those benchmarks of that we talked about at the beginning. Is like success versus failure. It's like, and like I said, I don't know that failure is really a real thing. If you learn from a mistake, you're not a failure. If you choose to ignore all the things the universe is trying to tell you, then in a sense you've failed to acknowledge the reality in front of your face, but you're still not a failure. You're just not ready. It's not the right time for you to see whatever it is that you're trying to see. So, yeah, I think to recognize the fact that our individual path is always evolving and changing as we grow, and that as long as we're moving forward and learning new things and being in our life and experiencing reality, then we're on our path. It doesn't have to be, like, the times I've connected to deities have mostly been a surprise, like out of the blue, not something I was trying to do, it just sort of happened. But I think it happened because I'm aware of who I am and what's happening inside of me and how I feel most of the time. And then when something is radically different than how I feel, I sit up and take notice and go like, what? What's that? And try to figure it out. And stay open to the possibility that my conclusions might be wrong. That's the thing, is that one of the things I like about real science is the fact that it's constantly evolving its understanding of the universe as it gains more facts and information. And if it doesn't fit how they think the universe works, they change their theory about how the universe works in order to absorb the new fact. And don't see that as a failure. It's just a benchmark. It's like, up until now, we thought this because this is what we knew. Now that we know something new, completely different, that doesn't fit what we already knew and how we figured out how that should work together, we now have to rethink everything about what we know in order to reevaluate our model of the universe and everything in it. And that is the same to me as a spiritual path. It's like you're evolving your understanding of what you know, and if you're willing to let go of it, dogma is the enemy of spiritual awakening, in my opinion. Because once you've developed a dogma, You've stopped growing, you've stopped expanding, you've stopped absorbing. You're beginning to die as a spiritual being. Because as we can look around the entire universe, everything is always in flux. Me sitting here in this chair on a planet that's rotating in space, that's hurtling around the sun, that's hurtling through a universe, or a galaxy, that's hurtling through a universe, nothing is still. There's no such thing as stillness in that sense. And so staying open-minded, and I think that idea of failure is the thing that catches us up, like to find out we were wrong about something. For some people, it's like deciding to kill themselves. Like my father, being able to acknowledge making mistakes and not being right about his actions and so forth, made him incapable of growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth, personal growth of any kind whatsoever, because he was so determined to not look reality in the face and accept it for what it was and his part in it. And I think that that's often the case when it comes to spiritual awakenings and religious dogma, spiritual dogma, cults, whatever. It's like they're trying to like stop that, stop changing all the time, and as if that's a bad thing, and they're looking for like a final answer. It's like, okay, I finally figured it out. This is it. It's the end of all things. I know the answer to every question in the universe. I no longer have to think. And I see that in elderly people, not in spirituality necessarily, but just in my practice, as a massage therapist, I could tell how close somebody was to dying by how engaged or not engaged they were with the world around them, and how interested or uninterested they were in the things that were changing in their life around them. When someone came in and said, I'm really sick and tired of everything changing around me, I don't want to have to rethink my ideas, I'm like, yep, they're not going to be here for long. And sure enough, they weren't. So flexibility of your spirit and opening yourself up to what you know is what you know right now, but it isn't necessarily truth in the final sense of the word truth, that it will never change. Your perspective on it can change in an instant. And I know I've had my epiphanies from time to time, and epiphanies are quite powerful and amazing and interesting and terrifying, because most epiphanies aren't good. In my experience, at any rate, most epiphanies are like, wow, really? That's who I've been all this time? This is what's going to happen if I continue on this path? So I know it seems all vague in a sense, but when you're in the middle of it, what I say will make sense. And yeah, I'm not sure how else to address it, which is why I like the question. It makes me think. And my thinking can change, like I said. So hopefully this has been thought-provoking for anyone who's decided to listen to it. And as usual, I'm quite interested in your thoughts and your, if you want to share some of your experiences and so forth with others, that's great. We now have the Facebook group called Siofra's Magic Alcove, being consistent, trying to make it easy to find if you're on Facebook. And certainly join in the conversation there and give me some new ideas about things to talk about, because I don't live in a vacuum, and this is about your community and your needs as well as my own. You can contact me at siofrasmagicalcove@gmail.com. You can friend me on Facebook at Siofra Bradigan. You can become a patron on Patreon. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get in touch with me if you have concerns, questions, ideas for new videos or whatever. I, generally speaking, enjoy interacting with everybody. So, until next time, this has been Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.